All right, here we go. Okay, Scott, thank you so much for joining me today on the Unstoppable Real Estate podcast. And what I'd like to do is have you kind of introduce yourself because you're going to have a lot of detail to share with us. But just to kind of let people know that this is Scott Carson. He is the owner of We Close Notes. He is also known as the Note Guy. And what he is going to share with us is his years of experience as he niched in the real estate industry, working with distressed mortgage notes. Did I get that right?
You got
All
it.
right.
You hit the nail right on the head. That 16 penny nail is flush with the
Whoosh.
board there,
Okay,
Dave.
let's
Go
do
ahead.
this. So I am
Yeah.
very interested in this because I think this is just an awesome way for agents that have clients that are investors. I think you can share a lot of great info here, but also for those that are just interested in investing. So I'm going to just open it up and let you talk because this to me is a very fascinating topic. So you've got the floor.
All right. Well, I'll just kind of share how I kind of got into this. I'm a previous banker with JP Morgan Chase, and a buddy of mine started a mortgage company back in 2004. And for basically 4 years, we were traveling the country originating mortgages for investors, home buyers, all sorts of people. And during that 4 year period, I was able to kind of learn from an active investor who was doing fix and flips, but who'd also owned a mortgage company during the 80s during
Mhm.
the savings and loan scandal, and had some paper, mortgage on their books that they had to sell off and other things. And I really had a really nice 4 year apprenticeship, not only on the origination side of working with so many investors and learning real estate investing that way, but also the creative way, how to create mortgages, or how to own or finance a property, or how to take over a property subject to the existing financing without, the traditional way of putting a down payment down and getting qualified from the bank. And
Mhm.
so when everything hit the fan in 2008 with the Great Recession, the Big Short, I stopped originating mortgages and just started calling banks to buy their paper, to buy their distressed debt. The mortgage, the first liens from the on residential commercial properties where borrowers had stopped paying because they couldn't pay, and started buying all that debt at a substantial discount. We saw a lot of values drop across the country. I'm in Austin, Texas, but I buy 99% of my stuff outside of the Lone Star State, actually,
Really?
because I'm buying I do, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I've got some stuff in Houston and other places, parts of Texas and stuff, but I haven't bought anything in Austin in over a decade,
Wow.
because I get a bigger bang for my buck by investing in this distressed debt in other parts of the country, like Ohio, Michigan, God's waiting room, Florida. I buy a lot down there, the Carolinas. And my goal, when I'm buying this debt, and I'm not really buying a mortgage to own the real estate, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
I'm approaching this of a property owner. I'm approaching it to be basically the lender, to become the bank. And what we do is when these banks that I'm connected with, these mortgage companies, we've built relationships where they'll send me lists of these notes where people haven't paid anywhere from 60 days to over sometimes 6 years or 10 years. And we can buy that debt, buy that mortgage at a huge discount. And that's one of the great things I think that most people don't realize is there's this niche of investing that's existed for decades and decades and decades that most people don't know about. Most people know about, hey, I'm gonna go buy a property, and go to a bank to get a mortgage. Then they get a letter from the mortgage company 30 days after they close that their mortgage has been sold to somebody else, and now they got
Mhm.
to pay this other company. Well, that's kind of the niche that I'm in, except I'm dealing with borrowers who can't pay for a variety of reasons. Maybe they've lost their job, or gotten sick, or gone through divorce, or had COVID, been laid off for a while. We're buying that debt at a huge discount. Now the borrower still owes what they owe Kim, but since we
Mhm.
buy that debt at a substantial discount, we're able to reach back out to the homeowner, the borrower, and say, "Listen, I know you haven't been able to pay in a while. The previous bank wanted you to pay the whole thing in full, or bring the full 12 months or 24 months of back payments to the table to get back on track. What can you pay, or what kind of terms are you looking for if you want to stay in a house? What can you pay? Because if you can't pay, you can't stay. But if you want to stay, let's figure something out that's a win-win." Couple examples for folks out there that like kind of real numbers. So like
Mhm.
uh, bought this mortgage, actually, let's say outside of Houston. Borrower owed $235,000 on this house. The house was worth about 200, as it said, so they're upside down by 35 grand. It hadn't paid in over a year. But the fund, the lender that held this paper along with a bunch of other stuff, they sent me the list and we saw this one. So, okay, what do you want for this note? They haven't paid in a couple of years. I'm like, well, we'll let it go for 109. I'm like, okay. I'm like, that's pretty good. So I buy the mortgage for 109. We reach out to the borrowers. They're not even living in the house anymore. It's a vacant house. They don't want they don't want to make payments. They can't afford to start making extra payments, stuff like that. And I said, well, would we'll work with it. Do you want to sign the property over to us and we'll forgive you of the debt? Well, they couldn't come to the table. They were fighting. It was like three kids fighting amongst themselves. So I said, well, if you can't come to an agreement, we'll just foreclose. And so that's what we did. We ended up foreclosing, even though we offered them even cash for keys to forgive them of this $235,000 in debt. They didn't want to play ball. So since we bought the note, we became the bank. We foreclosed. And now we've basically taken that property back. And now we own this property and then fixed it up and have sold it on the MLS, in the 200 range. So we made somewhere around 50 grand after repairs and stuff on that. That happens a chunk of the time. But what we really prefer to do, and we even offered this to them, and said, listen, your monthly payments on this mortgage are about $900 a month. If you want to stay, we're not going to require you to bring the 2 years of back payments to the table. Can you bring 4 months? Can you bring $3,600? Can you start paying a little bit extra each month? Because our goal, if we're buying it at the 109 and they start paying monthly payments to us, it's about a 12% cash and cash return right off the bat. So that's a pretty good. Now, if they can pay a little bit extra, or we hold that for cash flow for 12 months. Now, after the borrower has been paying on time for 12 months, it's now considered or reclassified as a reperforming note. Now, I could take that mortgage and sell it back to Wall Street or back to other note companies as a performing note at 85, 95 cents of value without having to do any legal, without having to do any repairs, just basically starting to collect payments through a servicing company that we hired to kind of do the borrower outreach. So that's actually what we prefer to do, is not to actually own the real estate, but actually work to keep people in their houses. As I like to say, we turn problem properties into profitable solutions by really trying to give that borrower a leg back into the game. And we're able to do that about 65, 70% of the time. The other 30% is either they just can't do it, or the borrower's passed away, or they just don't want to play ball and want to hide their head in the sand and not communicate, and then we're forced to go the route of legal. Right. When we buy that debt, we are literally becoming the lender, and we have all the same rights that the bank does when it comes to foreclose or modifying or working with the borrower as well. So over the last 16 plus years, we bought over $1 billion in debt on residential and commercial properties. And obviously, it's been big over the last couple of years here about people are not paying their mortgage, and we still have a really great low default rate compared to like what we did back in 2008, where it was up to 8 to 10%. But there's still, if you figure at a 3% default rate, and we have 80 million mortgages in the country, that's still 2.4 to 2.8 million borrowers in trouble that can't pay their mortgage. And with inflation going up and costs of goods and stuff like that, people are either having to make a decision: do I put bacon on the table to feed my kids, or do I pay the mortgage? Well, I'm gonna feed my kids and keep the power on, versus pay my mortgage. And so that's what we do. We buy debt in about 30 different states on anywhere from a $50,000 property and say outside of Toledo, Ohio, all the way up to like a $1 million property in South Florida.
Well, that's, to me, it's very interesting, because back in the 08, 09 era, if any agent lived through that, it was an eye opener. It was a very interesting time, but it was one of those that agents were asking me, oh my God, what do? I don't know how to maneuver through this world of real estate now. And, my biggest thing was telling them that, if you can help somebody, regardless of what, you're helping them with a short sale, foreclosure, whatever that may be, and put them before you, because of course there's no money being made. It will come back to you, and these people that are in distress now, they're going to remember that you were there to help them. And then when the market shifts, they're going to remember that, and they're going to come back to you. And that's what they saw, those agents that really were they cared. And, they might have had a little more money in the bank to help them through this than maybe another agent. But those agents within 5 years said that was the best thing they ever did, was to help their community. And so with you, doing what you're doing, you're giving them that option, but at the same time, kind of talk to me about, if I wanted to get into this business of distress notes and everything. I know you have a course, so kind of walk me through, if I wanted to do this like Scott does it, what would you recommend? And then how does that course appeal to me?
So the first thing I'm going to tell you is, some people have to think like, oh, do I need like $1 million or $5 million to do this note business? And the answer to that, it helps, but no, you don't need to have $5 million like you would have needed earlier on. There's a lot of lenders out there, banks, that will sell you an individual note. Now you're not going to buy a one-off note from like Bank of America, Chase, or Citibank, but there are plenty of other lenders and lending institutions out there. So the biggest thing is that we are not like targeting the homeowners, honestly. What we do is we target banks. It's a little bit different model. I have people that come to me, hey, I've got a distressed borrower. I'm like, well, who's their bank? I'm like, oh, it's previously the Countrywide, now Bank of America. Like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I can't buy a one-off note from Bank of America. They're just not going to play ball or anything that small.
Right.
But what happens is we get these lists from different lenders and stuff like that might have one note and might have like 1,000 notes. And we approach it from the point of a banking mindset versus owning the property mindset. And we always approach it too of how can we get this borrower reperforming for cash flow? Because when you've got cash flow coming in, you ain't got to work so hard. When your commission's based, like a lot of mortgage brokers, realtors out there, you're used to, hey, I got to make my 3 points. I got to make my 3 points, 3% or 2% if it's a short sale, and everybody bleeds. You know what I mean? There's one of the great things is when you're buying a note, that you can do all this due diligence. It's not the same thing. Hey, I got to put it under contract. I have to put some earnest money now. No. I just got 31 offers accepted 2 days ago, about $1.5 million funding amount, 0 earnest money, and I have 35 days to perform my due diligence. If something pops up that the taxes are too much, or the collateral file isn't good, or the property value doesn't come back what we expect to be, I can cancel any of those bids for any number of reasons and filter it down to 12 or 20, whatever it finally comes down to. Another thing is people are like, well, Kim or Scott, I don't have money sitting in the bank for that amount. That's fine. You have to realize too that everybody you come in contact with, if you're a great realtor, you're probably a really great networker, right? You're out networking, talking with people. People love talking real estate, but you got to realize that a lot of people, when they think investing, they think you got to have this huge amount of money.
Right.
We have a lot of our students that are buying individual notes that are like 25 grand or 50 grand or 100 grand, and they're able to buy 1 or 2 notes and get the ball rolling and get that borrower back on track. So it's returning in, $300, $500, $1,000 in monthly cash flow to them. They don't own the property. They're just the bank, and they're making a great ROI, because they're borrowing money from other investors out there at 6 to 8%, which is really good for somebody who's got money sitting on the sidelines not doing anything. In turn, you're making 12 to 20% on these deals, so you're able to, pay your investors a great return and still make money without having any of your own money in the deal.
Right. So if you were to have investors to go in with you, and that way you're not using your own money, you're using the investors. And let's say the deal goes south, what happens to that investor's money?
Well, let's talk about the ways that it's a great question. I love it. But here's the things that protect you. These are like the 6 things I always say that protect us. The first thing is that we're only buying a first lien. Okay. We're only going to buy a senior lien. The only thing that can wipe us out will be God and taxes. Well, you're going to check your taxes to make sure that you're not going to lose it at tax sale. That's part of your due diligence. If it's a huge amount of taxes, you're going to reduce your bid by the taxes owed amount so that you're buying at a good percentage. The second thing is you're going to buy at 70% of value or less. All right. So you're getting 30% discount or more. Most of the time it's 40, sometimes 50%, sometimes even like 70% discount, depending on where that asset is located. So if the borrower doesn't perform, like that's the whole goal. You buy the note at a big discount, you reach out to the borrower. If they can't play ball, then you go the route to foreclose and start that foreclosure process. Now that'll vary on a state by state basis. Here in Texas, we've got we've got fast highways, fast foreclosures, and fast executions. We can foreclose in 21 days. So if the borrower doesn't play ball with you, doesn't get back on track and come to the table in 60 days, you start that foreclosure process and get that thing sold in 60 days. Sometimes you can sell it at auction, foreclosure auction. If you can't sell at the auction, then you take it back, you finish the eviction, and then you fix it up and sell it on the open market as an REO. And that's a great thing. If you put insurance on the property in case the borrower is not paying insurance, and if, like you're talking, you got a tornado that touches down in your front yard and takes the roof off, you're covered. Another thing is you're not the one going out and foreclosing on the property yourself or trying to collect. We use professionals. We use servicing companies who have thousands and thousands of these deals that they work through. They're professionals that have fair debt collection practice licenses and certifications to call the borrower to work out a strategy of one of different 10 exit strategies with the borrower. You're not the one foreclosing, so we use attorneys to verify everything, to handle the foreclosure process, so it's not me having to show up and try to foreclose. And that's why we're buying this stuff at a discount, so it gives us plenty of options in case the borrower drags this out or they file bankruptcy. That's fine. We now have an attorney to talk to. Attorney can either be a payment plan or we're going to take the property back. So that's one of the great things that I like. Is one of the biggest mistakes new investors make is they think they're going to get into the the flip this house thing from HGTV. They like the idea of picking up paint colors and carpet, and then they over rehab a property than what they should, or they overpay for it because they're so earnest to do a deal. And that's what we tell our students, like, listen, do not do a skinny deal. If you do a skinny deal, you're going to be in trouble. So make sure that that the numbers make sense, that if you can, for what you're buying it, and the $3,000 or $5,000 in expenses you're going to cover in a non-judicial state, or the $3,000 to $7,000 expenses you're going to see in a judicial foreclosure state, making sure that what you pay for the note plus those costs, if you get the borrower back on track, that is at least a double-digit return in cash flow wise. So if you're paying your investor 6, you're still seeing 6. If you've got to foreclose, making sure it's still going to be roughly about a 20% annualized return, so you're paying your investor a decent return and you're still making money and going from there. So there's due diligence not just on the actual property, but we're also doing due diligence on the borrower, and then of course we're doing due diligence on the collateral file, because this is really what you're buying, is this loan file here.
It's that piece of paper, right?
Which this piece of paper is what controls the property and hold it. In this case, the pen is mightier than the sword or the hammer if you're a rehabber. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and we look through those things. There's vendors that help you look through that stuff, make sure everything's clean, all the documents are there, so you have the right to foreclose. So, like I said, something pops up along the way, value, borrower looks like they're too big pain in the ass, the foreclosure doesn't look like it's there's something wrong with the foreclosure, something like that, you can cancel the bid and walk away scot-free. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. So when you said earlier that you find properties in other states. So obviously you're working with anything outside of Texas as well. So what do you do? Do you just get a list of the homes that are, let's just say Oklahoma? There's a home in Oklahoma City that you find that's, the lender has, and then is it a similar process for each state, or do you have to have an agent in that state? How does that work?
Great question. So I got this tape in of 292 non-performing first liens, anywhere from 6 months to 10 years where they hadn't paid. And it was in 25 different states. Well, I whittled it down to 62 properties, or 62 notes, I should say, in 20 states. And we made offers on the 62. And I just pulled quick Zillow values. We know Zillow is way off, but we just still use that initially on the front end. They got an idea of value and run some numbers. Now, they came back and approved 31 of them. So now we are working with agents in each of those cities to pull comps, or depend on what the condition of the online photos that we can find, how recent they look, and what we can see at the county. we may have a realtor jump online and pull a real property report, an NARRPR.com report to give us a quick valuation. We'll always send somebody out to view the actual property to make sure it's still standing and not a shanty or a shack or just a slab, like a lot of properties in New Orleans might be in some cases.
Right.
So
Oh,
we
yeah.
work with agents. Yeah, we work with agents. There are eyes and ears. If you don't have an agent, there's a third-party service that we use that will send out an agent or a broker price opinion agent, a BPO agent to pull comps for us, take photos. We're not getting into your access to the properties because somebody's living it. So
Right.
part of why, part of that goes in. That's why we buy at a big discount, because if somebody is living in it, most of the time it's in pretty decent shape. And I actually prefer occupied asset. It's vacant. It's been vacant for 6 months or longer. It's probably had somebody break in, or the air conditioner may have gone on a vacation on its own. If it's
Yeah.
during the winter months up in like Michigan or something like that, you might have an indoor ice skating rink if somebody pulled the copper
Oh,
out of it.
Lord.
But in case something like that, that's why you pay for forced place insurance. So it's in case something like that happens that you can't see, you're covered and taken care of.
Okay. It's very interesting to me. I mean, I was telling my husband, I said, if I wish I had done this back in the day. So if, the way I look at it, everybody in today's world is talking about, have a second income, have a passive income, etc. And so I look at this when you and I first starting, I thought, this could be for anybody. You don't have to be a real estate agent to do this. But, as a real estate agent, and that's the majority of the audience that I'm talking to, if you have investors, this is a good way to, reach out to Scott and talk to him, but also as a real estate agent to start having your own portfolio, and build up that income and that rental property. And I just think it's great. One of the things that I wish I had done is when our sons went to college, I said we should just buy a house in that town, and then that we could put him in that house and rent it. And then of course friends looked at us and said, do you realize what they would do to the house? And I went, oh, that's true. But my oldest son, when he went off to college, once he got out of that second year of having to be in the dorms and he could live off the campus, he and four of his rugby buddies rented a house and they took care of it. Now I don't know what went on, but every time I went over there, it was decent, for four guys who played rugby, and everything. But these are things that I look at that I'm like, I'm learning from what I wish I had done. And then I want to share that with the next generation, because this is something I think is going to be big. But people that are, of course, I'm quite a bit older than you, but I think, you could start doing this at any age,
Yeah. Well,
and any,
I have students that are anywhere from like 18 up to 80,
yeah,
and what attracts it is it's not, you don't own the actual property. It's not turning into a rental. You're literally becoming the bank and they're
yeah,
paying you that monthly mortgage payment.
right,
So the way I always say is, like, a lot of renters, a lot of landlords, if they can get $250 a month positive cash flow above their expenses, stuff like that, that's kind of the number or more, depending on the market. We'll just say that that's okay. Well, I got 250 coming. Well, that's great. But what if you could get at least that number or more without having to deal with toilets, tenants, and trash
right.
outs, without having to deal with a fix it where it was the actual owner of the property's responsibility to pay the taxes, to when little Timmy flushes his rubber ducky down the toilet. You're not getting called at 2 o'clock at night. Nobody calls the bank to come unclog the toilet. It's the
That's
owner's
right.
responsibility. So that's the thing that we look at, is that three advantages I love to mention is that we're buying these at bigger discounts. We're getting these deals sent to us direct from banks and lenders on a monthly basis. We don't have to spend you don't have to spend thousands of dollars in direct mailing, like the foreclosures or stuff like that. Literally, the banks will send us their problem children, and we can cherry pick and go from there. And then thirdly is, since we're buying them at a bigger discount and we have a lot more flexibility in kind of how we approach these, we're making above average returns without having to deal with the fix and flip side of things. Now, you're still going to take some property back, and if you want to keep that as a rental portfolio, you can.
Right.
I had a good buddy who's up out of Boston asked me yesterday, so Scott, do you have a lot of rental properties? Like, no. Because if I owned rental property in 20 different states, it'd be a management nightmare in a lot of
Right.
cases. But I have notes in different states, and then I have one servicing company, or actually I have two. So every 5th and 15th, I get a report telling me who's paid or who hasn't paid. And if they haven't paid, they're starting to outreach. I don't have to worry about, if the AC stopped working. Now if they leave the
Right.
property, then I go in and protect my property and protect the asset. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that, I don't want to deal with, the power's out or the plumbing's not working. Well, that's you're the
Right.
owner of the property. You're supposed to maintain that. And that's kind of why, like in regards to your son's situation, he was an owner. He didn't
Yeah.
they took decent care of the property because they had to live in it. It's different if you're just
r-
going to sign a lease for 6 months and leave.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing is that we do a lot of good by keeping people in their houses and giving people an opportunity to get back on track. And if I have to take a property
Mm-hmm.
back, we do. But there's nothing great. I'll give you a great example here. I got this portfolio a few years back, and it had this one property in South Illinois. And I don't usually like to buy in Illinois because it's a kind of a funky state to foreclose in for over a year. I especially don't buy in Chicago. It's a rough area. But this was in South Beloit, Illinois. The family, the husband and wife, had lived in this house for over 18 years. They raised their 3 daughters in it. And I
Mm.
get this list, and the house was only maybe worth 35,000 on about a half acre. They owed over 60. They're upside down because they'd refinanced, took a little cash out when the boom went up, and then the value started dropping. Well, husband had a heart attack and been out of work for a couple years. And when I see this list, I'm like, okay, it's worth 35 as it sits. They owe 60. And I'm like asking the hedge fund, what do you want for it? Say, well, we'll take 12. I'm like, okay, 12, that's not so. I'll take 33 cents on the dollar of value or 20 cents on the dollar of what's owed. And I start looking at the notes from the borrower, and I can see I literally sent me a huge file, scan file, and I'm flipping through it, and I see this borrower's been trying to do this loan mod for 4 years, and she's
Wow.
sending letters trying to do the loan mod, and then the mortgage was sold to somebody else, and so she resends in her refaxes in her W-2s and her tax returns and her hardship letters. And I see this happen like 4 times because I see it from every time the mortgage is sold. I'm like, why haven't they modified or reached out and talked to the homeowner? So I'm like, I'll buy it at 12 because I know she says she's like, I can start paying my existing payment, which was originally like 450. I'm like, that's nothing big. So we buy the note, servicing gets transferred. We make a phone call out to Sheila, is her name. I say, Sheila, this is Scott Carson, and you may have gotten a letter that your mortgage is. So she's like, yeah. And she's like down. I said, whoa. I was like, don't be upset, Sheila. This is a good day. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, I've seen all your notes. I've seen your hardship letters. I know you want to stay in the house. Is your husband doing better? I see in one of your letters, he said he had heart. I was like, oh yeah, he's actually back to work now. I said,
Oh.
well, I'm like, that's good. I said, so you got a few income. I said, and are you still able to pay the existing like $450 a month? She's like, yeah. I said, can you pay anything extra? She's like, we could. I said, could you bring like 5 grand to the table? She's like, no, I can't bring 5 grand, but I got to bring 2,500. I'm like, okay, let's have you bring 2,500. Tell you what, we'll do this. You bring $2,500 to the table, and you go meet with my attorney, who's about an hour away from me in Illinois. There, you bring a $2,500 cashier's check. You start making your $450 a month payment. Can you pay $200 extra? And she's like, yes, we could do that. I was like, okay, great. So I'm thinking in my mind, she's not going to bring 5,000 table, but she will bring 5,000 over the first year. She
Right.
starts making her payment. You start adding this up. She basically paid 10 grand in the first 12 months towards what I paid for that mortgage at 12,000.
Oh, wow.
Pretty good ROI. So here's what I did for her. I said, Sheila, if you pay on time for 12 months, pay a little bit extra. What I'll do at the end of 12 months is we'll modify the loan. We'll pull a valuation, and whatever the value of your property is, we'll reduce the loan amount to exactly what the property's worth. So if it stays at 35, we'll drop the balance from 60 down to 35. We'll forgive you
Mm-hmm.
25,000. And then what I'll do, and this is what got her, she actually started crying on the phone. So what I'll do is I'll drop your interest rate. I see it's like at 8.5% now. I said, I'll drop it from 8.5 down to 0%. So that every dime, every nickel, every penny you pay towards the principal of the house, and you'll
Right.
now have your house paid off in roughly 6 years versus 32 years. And
Exactly.
she's like, shut up. I'm like, I'm serious. I'll have all this in my attorney. So 2 days later, she showed up with her husband, and they brought their cashier's check. They signed the trial payment plan agreements. We had it set up in servicing. We gave them 60 days for their first payment to make. She paid on time. Anytime she would be like a day late, she would like call me. I was like, no, you ain't got to call me, Sheila. You're good. Call the servicer, but you've got a 7-day window. So she did this, and this is in June, July. Well, in Christmas time, I get a Christmas card in the mail, and it's a family, instead of 5, of Sheila, William, and their 3 kids, now their eldest daughter had a child, and they had named the child Carson after me,
Aw,
helping them
aw.
stay in this house. And yeah, I mean, I'm like, "Whoo," but the great thing is they lived in the house, they paid their mortgage off in exactly like 4.5 years, because they started paying a little bit extra. They, there was such a huge relief, and that's what she said. She was like, Scott, I've been trying to. We've lived in this house for 18 years. We basically repaired it. We've kept it up. I have all our memories tied into this. We can't move
Mhm.
somewhere and afford something new, or couldn't qualify because this was sitting down on our credit. I'm like, well, if you pay on time, I'm not, I'm not going to report any bad payments to credit. You just start paying on time. If you want to refi, you can. But who wants to refi 0% interest? You know what I mean?
Right,
So,
right.
and so it's those kind of stories, I like getting. We love helping people. On the other side, we've got people that have taken 18 months to foreclose, another 6 months to evict. You know,
Mhm.
but
You know,
as I like,
I just think it's great, especially when you can help people, and people want, people that are, down on their luck, they want the help. And, this is something I will ask you is when people are down on their luck, that seems to open the door for people to take advantage of them because they're so desperate to find a way to make that happen. So when you reach out to them, how do you approach them so that they don't think, oh, this is another person after my house, or it's a scam and I'm going to lose everything? So
it's
how
a
do you overcome that with them?
so the great, this is what's important about servicing company. So when you have a mortgage, you're probably paying into a servicing company, your
Mm,
monthly payments, that's tracking everything. So when we buy a note, that servicing company, if we're going to keep it with the servicing company, then it's the same. They're still making payments to the same spot. So
right,
our rep at the servicing company is now reaching out and say, hey, the mortgage has now been sold, but we're retaining servicing. They're willing to offer you some sort of modification. You know what I mean? Or and
right,
and we'll do that a lot of times when we buy a note. We'll send a letter out immediately and say, listen, hey, your loan number is this. We know you're this far behind. We know your existing servicing company is this. You should have gotten a letter saying that your loan has been sold to us. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? If you want to stay, please reach out to us. We'll try to work a modification of some sort. No cash is necessary for the phone call. So that's the big thing, is that we're not having them wire money to us or send us money or pay with a
right,
credit card. We're like, listen, if we put this in place, you're going to pay the servicing company. This is going to pay, you're paying the third party that you've either been paying or that you should be paying now because you received letters in the mail or you've gotten a letter from our attorney saying, hey, you need to do this.
hmm,
So that's the big thing. I mean, when you talked about 2008, and there was a lot of unscrupulous people out there saying, oh yeah, for 5 grand I can modify your loan,
yeah,
and people just taking the 5 grand and running with it. Or same thing, hey, pay me 3 grand and I'll get a short sale. Well, you can't guarantee a short sale.
right,
And then you saw states like Maryland and others out there that started putting legislation in place that if you were the realtor, you couldn't handle the short sale or the modification agreement
hmm,
and stuff like that. But that's why, I mean, that's why I always tell people, like, listen, a lot of times all we're doing is educating borrowers on what their options are. Like, listen, if you want to do this, then you have to do this. If you don't want to do this, this is your other option. If you can't do that, then this is your third option.
right,
If you can't pay or don't have somebody can come and make payments, then you got to look to, we got to look to either get you out of the house. We'll give you some cash for keys to walk. If you don't want to play ball like that, I mean, I don't run a charity here. I'm
right,
willing to work with it, but you got to meet me halfway. That's the
right.
sort of.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it just, it takes you back to 2008 when we had these conversations, because I could tell you one story after another of people, and it would just, at the end of the day, I would just be in tears, but then you would have people that just didn't care, and then they would destroy the house, because they defaulted on it, and you tried to help them, but they didn't want the help, or they didn't trust you enough. And then they trashed the place before they left. And so it was, I hope we never see that again, that kind of real estate again. But,
So there's something I got to share with you on that. Yeah, people that deal with, I don't want to say deadbeat tenants, but we'll just say deadbeat tenants, people that trash the
yeah,
property and leave off. You know, a lot of people will go to the courts and get a deficiency judgment and then try to collect through that aspect. I'm not a fan of
mhm,
that. Yes, I
mm,
think you need to go and have that reports saying the credit, but I don't start going after for deficiencies of it. What I recommend people do is at the end of the year, just send them a 1099 for all the repairs and the lost rent, and then they get taxed on it as income, and you can
Yeah.
write that off your profits much faster than trying to collect a deficiency judgment most of the time.
Oh, now see, there you go. Okay.
You know, and another thing too, for those of you that don't have investors, and you're sitting there like, well, I don't know investors, I just a traditional realtor. You can go to just about every appraisal district, county appraisal district, and if you search for self-directed IRA companies, and these are companies out there that allow people to have a Roth or a traditional IRA that can invest in real estate, like buying a rental or investing in a note. Whereas you're like at Charles Schwab and AG Edwards, they're only unless you invest in the funds or money market accounts that they have. They don't do real estate. But if you go to your county appraisal district and do a search for like Equity Trust Company or Quest IRA or Quest Trust Company,
Mm-hmm.
it will pull up a list of people who have used their self-directed IRAs to buy a property. Or if you look at the county records, the same search and look for, you'll see somebody who have lent money out of their IRA. And you can literally find these people, hundreds of investors that have money, they've pulled the
Right.
trigger. And guess what? They're looking for deals to invest in. And so one of the things that we teach, like, listen, target IRA investors, you don't have to educate them on the power of real estate investing. They've got money, they're looking for more deals. It's a really great match made in heaven. When you find a deal, if it's a good deal, it's pretty easy to raise capital if the numbers make sense in your due diligence.
Oh, I love that tip. Okay. Well, now let's talk about this course because I'm very interested in how this works. So if I'm ready and say, you know what, I want to either learn how to do this and share it with my investors, or I want to do it on my own, what do we need to do, Scott?
So we have two different choices for you. We have a 3-day class that we teach like once a quarter called Note Buying For Dummies. It's about $1,000. We go through how to find, fund, and flip. 3 days of intensive me teaching you how to find these deals from banks, what to say, what not to say, how to raise capital, how to market these deals, and then how to make money with them. But I've got a 1-day class that is every third Saturday of the month. We record it. It's usually $99. I'm going to give that to your audience for free. We call that Note
Oh,
Weekend.
no.
And if they go to noteweekend.com, they click on it,
Noteweekend.com.
noteweekend.com, and it'll ask them to, click here to RSVP, click on it, it'll ask for their information. It'll take them to a checkout thing. Well, they'll still ask them for the credit card, make sure their real number. But if you put the code Kim in, KIM, capital Kim, it'll
Mm-hmm.
give you the class for free. If you can't make it on a Saturday, it's fine. We'll send you the replays, the most recent ones, so you can watch those. And that's a good way for you to dip your toes in the note deep end to see if this is something for you if you want to take it to the next step.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love that. I might do that myself. So, so okay, so it's Note, weekend.com and use the code Kim at the checkout and it's
Yep.
complimentary. That's
Yeah,
great.
it'll drop it down to zero, but you'll still need to put your credit card info in there. Not that we're pulling anything, just to verify that you're an actual individual. That's all.
Right, right. Okay. Now tell us a little bit about your podcast because this is what you do. So if somebody wanted to tune into your podcast, what can they expect?
Yeah, I've been podcasting about 6 years. It's called like a show called the Note Closers Show podcast. It's the #1 podcast out there for note investors out there. We've got
Mm-hmm.
745 episodes, a couple million downloads. We've also got the #1 YouTube channel with all sorts of
Wow.
videos and training. If you go to weclosenotes.tv, they'll take you directly to our YouTube channel. But it's
Okay.
me teaching most of the time some niche, some facet. We do bring on guests that are experts in a niche that helps our students out there. But yeah, I mean, if you like the movie The Big Short, note investing is a lot like The Big Short in a lot of cases.
Okay.
I'm like the Christian Bale character in that movie, banging on the drums and jamming out to rock and roll music during my office, looking at spreadsheets all day. But
Oh, how funny.
that may not sound attractive, but the returns are sexy, and that's what we call it.
Yeah.
Note investing is a sexy side of real estate.
I mean, it's what gets you excited is what happens, and I just think this is a great opportunity for so many right now. And then after what we've all been through with real estate over the last 2 years, I think with the market kind of leveraging out and some things are fixing to happen. I mean, I'm not going to, give my prediction, but, I do see a huge shift coming. And I think this would be a great opportunity for a lot of investors to get in on, or just individuals like you and, well, you, not you like you because you're out there, but people like me that, want to do something more than what we're already doing, and it doesn't sound like it would be that big of an effort and everything to understand. It's just learning the process is basically what we're doing. So I think that's great.
Yeah, it's totally, and I'll tell you this, I believe that we're already seeing reductions or markets starting to soften or get a little bit more distressed just because of everything going on. You don't have to have a lot of common sense to understand that middle America is really being squeezed more than anything else out there. And when I start getting phone calls or emails, or I start seeing more product come from me to me, I see stuff 6 to 12 months ahead of it hitting the MLS or hitting the foreclosure markets.
Right.
And we've seen more product in the last 6 months than we had seen previously in the last probably 4 years. And so, and if you like residential, great. But also another huge avenue, which we haven't even talked about, is small balance commercial debt. Anything under 5 million. There's a lot of distressed commercial real estate out there that you can pick up for a song and a dime.
Oh, okay. So you could do commercial and residential, and I mean, I guess any type of real estate then. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see assets on hotels. We see assets on apartments. I mean, apartments are a little overpriced right now, but we're starting to see, as interest rates have gone up, we're starting to see a lot of these people that bought apartment complexes, 2, 3, 4 years ago that had the exit strategy to recalibrate and then refinance out. That refinance strategy is no longer around because interest rates are so high, and banks are starting to go to these smaller operators and say, listen, hey, now you need to bring 10 or 20 grand or 10 to 20% cash to reduce your loan LTV, because we don't want to be above 70%. And a lot of operators don't have that extra cash or can't go to their investors to raise that to stay in the property. So we're seeing actually performing apartment loans that are defaulting because of this interest rate hike in some things. And it's not a surprise because we saw that happen back in 2008 and 2009 as well.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you, 2008 was an interesting, well, it was real. Yeah, 2008 was an interesting year, professionally and personally. So we were in the middle of it. So,
yeah.
So, okay. So if you were going to give a tip to, to anybody that's listening right now on the first thing that they probably should do is what?
First thing you should do if you're going to be if you're going to be an investor, you're going to realize that you've got to market yourself. This is the number one thing. Anybody can make money in an increasing market. It's when the market starts to shift and change that you have to get off your keister and really get out and start marketing. I mean, we see this happen every time in Austin. We have 15, 20,000 realtors. The market changes, it gets reduced to 6,000. You know what I mean? You got to understand that you've got to market. And that's the thing I'm a big advocate of, is that you got to get your word out. You got to network with people. You got to just start touching base with your audience on a really a weekly basis. Not the, hey, do you know somebody who's buying or selling a property? I want to actually share that, hey, I'm an actual investor too. I'm not just a realtor. I'm actually buying real estate for my own portfolio, or I'm also an investor as well. You've known me as a realtor for 5 years or 5 months, but I'm taking advantage of what the market has given us to buy real estate. And if you've got lazy assets, you've got a CD that's now a certificate of disappointment, or you've got a 401k that's now a 101k, let's talk, because if you're not getting above average return, we can help you get that and truly create a win-win for you. And you just got to approach it. Look, you don't have to have the capital yourself. Get out and market. If you find a good deal, there's plenty of great capital on the sidelines for you.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. We met, I just want to share with our listeners the power of the internet and social media is we met through LinkedIn. And so, I'm constantly telling my clients, yeah, you can be on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that. But to do business, you need to be on LinkedIn. And that's where you and I met. So I would highly recommend that anybody listening, make sure you're out there on LinkedIn and your profile is updated. People know how to reach you and what you do, because that's how Scott and I connected. So I just think it's great, and everything. And of course, I'm just starting out with the podcasting. So, having you to help me with some things is great.
You're doing a great job. And those of you that are listening to this, make sure you do Kim a favor. We as podcasters love to hear from our audience. So if you love this episode or you love any episodes Kim has done, hit that subscribe button, and then also hit that 5-star review and leave Kim a 5-star review. We love to
Oh,
see that stuff. Kim will appreciate it. We just forget to ask. So make sure you
yeah.
subscribe and leave a 5-star review for Kim. We'd love to see
You
that.
know, that's something I just don't ask, you know, because I'm still trying to maneuver my way through. You know, I tell people, I don't mind telling you that I'm still kind of green because everybody started in the same spot. And so, you
Yes.
know, anything we can help each other out, I think is great. So I appreciate that as well. So, Scott, how can people reach out to you besides going to noteweekend.com?
Yeah, it's real easy. You know, you can go to weclosenotes.com. That's our main website. That's the mothership that houses, you know, our classes, our blogs, our podcasts. You can see all that we do there. I'm also on most social media handles as one Scott Carson out there as well. But yeah, go to weclosenotes.com. Feel free to shoot me. You can always, if you want to pick my brain, you can always go to my calendar and go to talkwithscottcarson.com. That'll pull up my calendar. You can schedule a 30-minute phone call to pick my brain, ask me questions, and we can go from there.
Oh, that's great. Everybody needs to do that. Be prepared. All right,
Right.
Scott. Well, listen, thank you so much. I hope we can have you back again soon. And to everybody out there, I hope that you picked up some tips from this and you go to his website and take advantage of the free course that he's offering y'all today. So thanks again, Scott, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Take care, Kim.